Stockbridge-Munsee. My name is Shannon Holsey, President of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians in Bowler, Wisconsin. Land stewardship, forest management, and the lumber industry have been a sustainable business for our tribe. We have endured many wind events throughout that time, none of which compare to the devastating storm of 2022, which impacted over 50% of our natural forest. Each one of our community members have their own stories to share about that day, which will be told for the next generations to come. This documentary touches on the history of forestry and logging, how the forest benefits our community, and eyewitness accounts from the community members and volunteers who came together to help that day. As we know, trees today are no less sacred than they were centuries ago. We must continue to nurture, steward, protect, and appreciate the gift Creator has bestowed with the gift of the tree.
The Stockbridge-Munsee community originally consisted of the two complete townships of Bartlemy and Red Springs, as established by the 1856 treaty. Those townships at the time were full of virgin timber. The tribe had purchased it from the Menominee Nation to the north, and we had moved up from Stockbridge, Wisconsin, where we had established a community along the shores of Lake Winnebago. The lands up here, because of their rich natural resources, became targeted. Around that time, at the turn of the century, Wisconsin was being logged off. This pocket of virgin timber was very attractive to the logging industry. By the turn of the century, the tribe had lost most of the land they held collectively within the two townships. Internal struggles and pressure by the logging industry essentially wiped out that land base. It wasn't until the Indian Reorganization Act of 1935 that the tribe was recognized by the federal government as a native nation. During that, we were able to acquire a small portion of the land base back. Ironically, it was from a lot of the logging industry who no longer had any use for it because the timber was gone. So it was barren land that had been clear-cut and they didn't need it anymore, which was fortunate in a way because it established a land base for the tribe for decades to come. A lot of that land was located in Bartlemy. Our population center originally was in the Red Springs area, so we're originally based in the east, and then we moved to the west, which is where we're at now. Forestry became important to the community in the 70s. We established our forestry department and we began to manage the forest sustainably, and it brought in revenues for the community to run government, to assist the community through jobs. The industry is only secondary to the casino industry. Over the years, there has been other storms, other blowdowns, that have done significant damage, but not to the extent of the storm of 22. Essentially, 50% of the commercial forest was impacted by that storm, a lot of which you see needed to be clear-cut. The damage was so severe, there was really nothing the community could do but restart, so to speak. It's been eye-opening, to say the least, of what Mother Nature can do. There are still some of those tribal elders who remember when they were little, when the forest was very young. The lands that we got back after 35 were just starting to come up again. It was nothing like the forest that we had prior to the storm. There was there was definitely a sense of sadness within the community to the extent of the damage. We are a resilient people, and we know, what Mother Nature takes away, she will reestablish. More than likely, it's not going to be the same for a lot of us. Ultimately, when we look at the department and the industry in general, I think we look at it that we are doing a pretty good job.
June 15th, 2022. The community had gathered at North Star Casino at our event center for our annual high school senior graduation banquet. Many of the community members were there to honor our graduates. During that time, we were sitting down, everybody was sitting down, we had opening remarks, so on and so forth, getting ready to eat. All of a sudden, simultaneously, 100 cell phones went off with a weather alert.
The night that the storms came in, we were actually at our yearly senior banquet at our casino. I'm at the mic and, we're all talking about, they're saying that we might have some severe weather tonight, so I'm trying to do things in a timely manner, and everybody's phone went off with the weather alert.
I happened to be coming from the Twin Cities on a plane. I got to see the storm from the air before it hit our area.
The emergency preparedness management job was my job, which I was only in a year. And we've never had a tornado of that magnitude in this area since the tribe has been here. So I thought my job was going to be pretty easy.
Well, way back in the early 2000s, we had a bad storm, straight winds. Two of us decided to stay behind just in case. And good thing we did, because we would never got to work.
I checked the weather in the morning, and I had seen from the weather that there was a mixed front kind of coming in this direction. So I was kind of watching the TV.
It was quite the thing to see and hear all those cell phones going off. So we knew something was going on.
We serve power to the Stockbridge-Munsee reservation, the majority of it. Because there is another utility that comes in from the east. As far as the residential part of Stockbridge-Munsee, central Wisconsin serves power to.
Just before the storm happened, I was actually in the village of Gresham at a meeting with the board members there. And then as we're in the meeting there, I'm hearing the sirens starting to go off.
I kind of looked at it, and it was supposed to get storms in our area when I got home, but I didn't know the severity of them until we got to Minneapolis. In the airport itself, they were concerned about that storm that was in between Minneapolis and Wisconsin here home.
The night of the storm, I personally was with my daughter and granddaughter at my home. And we had been watching the storm on radar. We had got the weather updates that, it was going to be a doozy.
A couple hours ahead of time that there was going to be severe thunderstorms, but nothing, I didn't realize it was going to be that bad. So I was at home with my family when they hit.
So, and then when this storm hit, I stayed behind just so we could make sure we made it to work and got the equipment and could respond faster.
I was also watching the sky, and it was heavy, dark, menacing like.
When we got to Minneapolis, we realized that we had to delay a little bit and put extra fuel in to fly south of the storm, and then to come back up to the Appleton area to land. It was a very horrible flight, but I did get some video footage of the storm head, the thunderhead, as we were in the air before we landed.
Everybody's picking their phone up, and I don't have a phone with me because I'm at the podium talking to people, and I'm like, so I guess we're having some good weather, and whatever, and everybody's like, yeah, So we just continued. We continued with the night. We had no idea what was going on outside of those walls.
Being that June 15th was a wind event, I think, our linemen at the time knew there was going to be many, many outages.
Well, I could tell that the storm was ramping up out there, and I'm hearing the report. So I went into my studio, which is like steel doors. It's the most secure building in the house, but no windows.
The night of the storm, I was in Shawano, and I was driving home. I live in Marion, and coming down Highway 22, saw the clouds coming in, really wasn't watching the weather, didn't know that a big storm was coming, but noticed that the winds picked up. Trees started bending pretty far. I actually stopped on Highway 22 and parked next to a cornfield.
My sister runs the food pantry in Wittenberg, and I help her with that. And it was around 5 o'clock we started distributing, and we got done, and we were just restocking the shelves and stuff for the next morning, and all of a sudden the wind kicked up.
As we watched the storm develop on radar, and you know, with the modern technology, cell phones, whatnot, you can do that, right? You can plug in and say, where's the storm at? And it could tell it was getting real close to the house.
And this is my studio here we're standing next to. And it's a solar powered studio. I can run on or off grid.
We stood there in my little room, and as we're watching, all of a sudden the trees started bending all the way down to the ground. The tops of the trees were touching the ground.
I knew it was going to rain, so I had told my grandson I wanted him to feed the dog. It started to rain, and he said, I said, oh, don't do it now, it's raining. And he said, no, I'm going to do it. And out the door he went. All of a sudden, my older grandson come running in the house, and he said, get in the basement, get in the basement.
On that day, there was weather coming. When we heard the tornado siren go off, the storm hit. There was absolutely no time to prepare.
Once we landed, that was kind of the concern of everybody on the plane. Everybody took their phones off of airplane mode, and everybody's phones went wild with the alerts and, you know, all the warnings and everything else that was happening.
And I knew the storm was coming, but I didn't think it was coming that soon.
I was on my way back to work. As soon as I heard thunder, I came in, and that's when the storm hit. It kind of drove through it.
The winds kicked up, and the trees started to blow, and like, hopefully this subsides rather quickly.
The lights had flickered a little bit, but due to generators, you know, when it came on.
As the sirens are going off, one of my tribal deputies is working at that time, and he started to text me, I need help.
But I remember one point when it was really loud, and you know how a tree falls, it sounds like a stick of dynamite going off sometimes. You can feel the ground go.
And I said, run, this is it. We need to be in a safe place.
Everybody started running for the basement. Being stubborn, I decided I wanted to go look.
I got caught near Black Creek area, and it was very violent. It was very violent, and I was pretty nervous on the road where you're not supposed to be.
And that's when the storm started to really kind of kick up. I was like, okay, well, I've got Ma here. I got to get her into the basement.
And watched a lot of trees come down, rain's complete whiteout, cars parked all over on the road.
The intensity of the storm picked up, and right about the time we're on the radar, the deep red color that indicates a severe storm was over our house.
My family went into the basement. I went into the garage, and I had to open the garage because the power was already out.
He went down to the basement, and I went to the bathroom because there's a double wall around.
And I took a peek out into the other room where there's nothing but windows, and it looked like the house was going through a car wash.
Oh yeah, my phone was going nuts between text messages, alerts, warnings, people trying to contact on what was going on. I was trying to contact my family and my kids to make sure that they were okay, because I know they had a graduation event that was happening here for the tribe for our graduating seniors and our senior class that year.
I originally didn't think it was going to be that bad because they usually dissipate and, you know, they downgrade. This was not the case this day.
My family went down into the basement. I headed for the door to look, but trees were blowing by the window, and a piece of metal flew by. And it got dark, and the rain and the hail was coming down so high, and I turned around and I ran down in the basement. That was the first time in my life that I ever went into my basement for a storm.
I watched the funnel jump the river in midair, land down on this side, and started going up the hill again.
Everyone got in the basement. And then I started getting text messages about people trapped on the road from trees down.
I think we need to get in the basement right now. And so we went and sheltered in the basement. This should be over in like 4 minutes. We got 4 minutes. And it was like time stood still, unfortunately. When you're in a situation like that, time isn't going fast enough, right? You know, you want it to be over.
And I watched the tree in front of me, there are 3 of them behind the house here, just go and fall. And I'm like, okay, I got to go get Ma, but Ma wouldn't go down to the basement. So we went into the bathroom because that's where she felt safe, and closed the door. And it lasted all about 15 minutes.
You know, when you go through those automatic car washes, you're looking at your windshield, and it's just water shooting everywhere. You can't even physically see past the glass, for the water swishing around. And it had this green tornado tint, the classic tornado green. And it looked like every single window that I saw on both walls looked like they were going through a car wash. So like literally my house was going through a car wash.
And I just watched it from the garage, and I watched trees lay down with no noise. They were going right by my house, and right after that I heard it sounded like a freight train, and it just went on and on and on.
And then the trees started groaning. They sounded like bam.
We sat down in the basement 10 minutes, and the house was shaking, and you could hear the trees snapping, and it was a very scary event.
I can only describe it as, for those of you that remember the old tube TVs, when your screen just kind of goes white and the picture kind of fuzzes out, right? That's what it was looking out the window. It just became white.
And then the phone alert started going off. Then my fire EMS radio went off with a severe warning page to seek cover. And then I looked outside. Yeah, the winds, you couldn't see out the windows, the winds, the rain. It was pretty blurry actually because of the amount of rain that was coming down with the wind that was pushing it. So it was a lot of blurry, you couldn't really see.
I myself, we left. I knew there was something going on, so I left the venue.
I tucked myself back into the studio, but it was really wild.
Bam, bam, you were hearing the ground was shaking everywhere because these tall pine trees were sacrificing themselves on the ground. It was just...
So I immediately left that meeting and began to work out on the road and try to help as much as I could.
Tick-tock, tick-tock. I'm like, okay, it should be past, got like 120 seconds, and it should be past our house. Literally, I was thinking that in my mind, and we hear this huge crash that just rattled the entire house.
As the night is coming to an end, everybody's like, oh, we got a text, They said the weather got bad and there's trees down everywhere. And I'm just like, what?
It was pretty chaotic. It was hard to get through to anybody and to deal with getting hit by the storm. So once that kind of stopped and the storm kind of passed, I was able to get here and then realize the damage once I got here.
That would be a large tree that just struck our house. I mean, I knew it right away.
I was only in the bathroom for about 15 minutes, and you could hear the sound of the trees shattering as they twisted in the winds, and the sounds of them falling.
Me and my grandson went up the steps, and we looked out, and our steps looked right out the window. And we could still see the trees moving, but it had calmed down 50%. So then we went outside, and we had trees, literally 100-year-old trees, sugar maples, 24-inch, laying down in the yard, covering the vehicles, and the rain was just torrential rain, and hail came afterward, and it was the worst wind event that I had ever seen in my life.
It looked like, if you could imagine a tree is like a spear broccoli. It's got a stem and then it's got a head of leaves on top. It looked like somebody just came off and just ripped them right off.
When we got out, I couldn't believe what I saw.
So then people started calling and getting phone calls about what was happening.
What do you mean there's trees down? And they're like, you can't get anywhere. You can't get down Mohikinock. You can't get down Camp 14. My mom lives on Camp 14. I live off of Mohikinock. I'm like, well, what am I going to do?
Once it calmed down a little bit where I could get outside, that's when I left for the EMS call and the people trapped on the roads.
Once I waited that out and it kind of cleared, it was pretty quick. Then my phone started blowing up and started to get calls from Bert Davids, from Chad Miller saying, hey, the big one happened.
We encountered a lot of trees down on the roads. We had to backtrack and come back a different route.
They weren't passable at all. Trees were falling in front of us, behind us, People were blocked in between.
Everything was different, everything was changed. This was all big pine trees behind me and down into the, they were all laying down on the ground in different states and limbs everywhere.
Once it was safe, I got in my vehicle and came here, and this is where we set up the central control.
Yeah, I had my business clothes on yet from what we were coming from in Alaska, and when I met up with these guys, the fire department and our roads department on River Road, it was time to change the clothes right there in the back of the Nissan and get to work.
I looked out the other window and you could not see any of the driveway, any of the road. It was all covered with trees and limbs and just broken everything, all different which ways. It wasn't lined in an orderly manner. It was just a mess.
And we get outside of the casino and the sky is this really crazy color, and I'm just like, whoa, what is going on here? You know, this is really bad.
The storm had passed, and I'm like, well, okay, time to go up and see what the damage is. So coming up the stairwell, I opened the door, and I could see the ceiling had collapsed to a degree. The drywall had cracked, and water was pouring into, the front entry of our house. I'm like, ugh.
Well, this is the one that we always dreaded would happen. It was by far and away, I think, the largest storm as far as damage to timber that they've had here since the reservation was formed.
And realized that the pole was snapped all the way off and that the wires were in the river.
Members that are out of power will call a 800 number, and the dispatchers will relay the outages to our linemen on call. Once they get there, they assess the situation.
Within an hour or so, everybody was coming out. The neighbors across the street were coming out. There were trees laying across the road. No one could even get through.
But I made it through and got the front end loader and threw a saw and I just took off and started cutting and pushing trees off the road.
I mean, it was pretty devastating. The amount of timber that went down.
There's trees across every roadway. There was power lines down all the way down and trees across the road for days and days.
When I went down Murphy Road, it was like, oh my God. It was like, I called my supervisor. I said, we have a lot of damage. Everything I'm looking at is level. He's like, oh, calm down. It can't be that bad. I said, it's that bad. I said, we have major damage here.
My studio got hit and broke a couple of stringers across the thing, and there was water damage and some damage up there.
Our fire chief called and was one of them trapped between trees. So, and we had a logger help. We had roads department helping. It was a lot of cutting.
Very dangerous to be out in a lot of that stuff because stuff was still cracking, stuff was still coming down.
There was one EMS call of a lady who tried to go to her son's house next door during the storm and fell down and needed help up. So we were trying to respond to that through EMS, and the roads were all blocked.
We were able to make contact with that patient, and she did state that she was okay. And then after that, all we did was go from tree to tree, line to line down. And a lot of times we couldn't even get very far, so then we were just reaching out to the community members for the roads departments and trying to put up barrels and just to block off roads. It was truly the worst storm I think I can remember being involved in.
I wound up filling pots with water because I knew I would be out of water soon.
And no one had power. Oh, I had power, but no one else had power.
We ended up having several LP tanks that trees fell on that were hissing gas.
And then we made our way climbing in and out of the trees to our house because we have a dog. It was crazy, scary, thinking like, do we dare go through these trees? Where are the power lines?
It wasn't only me without electricity, the whole community was without electricity.
We have an outage management system that shows all the outages, all the members that called in. And so when I came in that afternoon, because it was June 15th, Wednesday afternoon, there was just page after page of people without power.
So we got up here and started cutting roads open, and roads department was already on it. EMT crews were on it. Property and equipment crews were on it.
Was able to get here, make sure the family was safe and the kids were safe. Met up with these guys on River Road. It was the fire department, it was emergency management, Bill Terrio, and roads department had already got their machines out and were cutting.
I was so glad to see fire department and community members, everybody was helping.
Our roads department had already had one road, our main road, Mohicanuk Road, semi-opened. Had trees, front end loaders and things of that nature, pushing and just opening, clearing the road, which was priority number one.
And at that point, we started calling other crews and our own crews at Central Wisconsin. So once we got all our linemen into the office, and then we started dispatching different locations.
And my husband calls me, I heard you got hit with a storm, and I said, yeah. I said, I'm not going to get out of here for a while. And my son wanted to come over and do a strap carry on his back with me across the river, and I said, no way, no way are you carrying me across the river,
Some ladies came to the door and said, we're taking people's food and putting it into a public freezer and a public refrigerator if you have anything that you need. And I was actually okay, but I know they were going around to all the different houses and checking on people.
You know, that was a shock, but when I looked to the back of the house where the forest was, and I say was, it was gone. It was unbelievable what had happened in a very short amount of time.
Got the president on the phone and explained what it was like on the ground and what was going on to declare that disaster.
Yeah, you're out of power. It's very unfortunate, but any lines that are down, if there's tree limbs on a line, smoking or something, so we would respond to those first before restoring power because we want to make the public safe.
2 hours went by, and this guy emerges from this road that's not there anymore. And I said, Lon, what are you doing here? He said, you won't believe it. He said, I crawled here under and over the trees. He said, I thought I could just come in and cut 1 or 2 trees and then your road would be open. He said, there are thousands of trees down out there. And he said the only way he could tell where he was he'd dig down in the ground and find the gravel for the road. That's the only way he could tell whether, he said he got to the top of the till and he had no idea where he was. He had to go down into the pothole and across this big pothole behind here to see that I was okay.
2 trees connected like this and fell about this far away from the corner of my house. There was one on my roof, but the rest of them were mainly like in my backyard. It's just like all these trees are just laying down.
In the morning we kind of got up here and some of the roads that started being open, we could kind of get around and really start seeing that this was the big one.
I thought that was an extraordinary feat of kindness and caring.
We stopped at Putman Lane. There was a lot of trees down. There was homes back there. I ended up crawling over and under and around trees to get to the homes. And I came to my first home, and you couldn't even see the house. No vehicles, the trees were all covering it.
Got the chainsaws, got in the truck, and started going around and seeing what we could do to assist, clearing driveways, so on and so forth, so people can get in, at least be able to get in and out. Many of our community members were doing the same thing.
You know, as the public, all across our system, and maybe all utilities, not maybe, all utilities, is anytime you got a down wire, stay away from it.
I'm holding this little hat because the Bay Mills crew came and they cut for 4 days with a big machine. It took them 4 days from National Guard Road to the edge of my property. And meanwhile, my son and Andrew and David and another neighbor cut like crazy from this end and managed to meet each other right at our borderline at the top of the hill.
We started cutting at 6:30 in the evening, and we cut till midnight, and we still hadn't made it out to the main road yet.
And we worked till 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure everybody could get out.
I was working with the fire department and assisting the emergency management and what he needed, on what resources were needed, where and why, everything from monetary to, and start establishing that command. So then it was kind of pulling me all over different directions.
Make safe is anything that's hazardous or dangerous to the public, we'll make it safe.
At that point, you go into emergency management mode, and you're concerned about your family members. You get on the phone, you start calling, and just to make sure that everybody's okay.
Because when a down power line is laying on the ground, the public has no idea knowing if that's energized or not. It just lays there invisible, quiet, and so what we do is with the Make Safe is, again, we go out there and we make sure that line is de-energized. And if we can ground the line, we ground it, and that's just another added safe practice.
The roads crew worked through the night and into the next day to get places open. In the meantime, the people were here. We went out door to door to make sure people were okay. We checked every house. If there was no damage to the house, we moved on to the next one to make sure people were okay.
And the next day is when the EMT role came in, and we had to check on people. Do they have power? Do they need water? Do they need food? They get them somewhere where they can shower and where they can go to the family center and get cooled down, because nobody had power for days.
I usually go out in the field called bird dogging. I start running out lines ahead of crews to see what's going on, what we may need for material. We have poles broken down, wires laying, trees. 2 chainsaws, and my grandson was pulling the brush off the road, and logs, big round blocks, we'd cut them into firewood length and roll them off the road. So then we give up. We were soaking wet, tired at midnight. We went home. We got back at her at 6:30 in the morning, and we made it to the blacktop at noon the next day.
The biggest problem was that we were out of power, and some people were still trapped into the next day. Firefighters and volunteers would go through like jungle-like brush through roads to get to people's houses and let them know that we know they're there.
There's 23 electric co-ops in the state of Wisconsin. We all help one another. And at that point, we had called in 4 electric co-ops requesting help. They provided us with bucket trucks and linemen. We had a contractor crew that came in, overhead contractor crew, and then we had, I believe, 4 Zeelies crews, Zeelies vegetation management. They do the tree cutting ahead of our linemen. So that speeded up the process.
So we immediately had a meeting the next day here and about getting water out to people, because I believe we were down multiple days of electricity.
We have a total of 8 substations, so not only the Stockbridge-Munsee was affected, I think all 8 substations were affected.
If people needed water or food, we assisted with that. As the power was out for 3 days, our fire department takes the brush truck and we go around and fill up buckets so people without power can at least still flush their toilets.
What a brilliant thing to do, because we were all stuck. That would have been a nasty mess.
We had a fire call that was paged out for a garage fire. And at that time of battling that garage fire is when the power got turned back on in this district.
The lineman called me from the field and stated that they got this section of line on, but they could see smoke, after they energized. And I'm like, oh, wow. So they actually ran down there real quick, but they were able to disconnect that power to that place, possibly to prevent a total burn down.
Coordinating with other agencies to get aerial flights, aerial photography, to assess the damage and really figure out what was down, because you couldn't walk through it. You couldn't drive to most of it. We tried to throw drones up here and there where we could see, but every time we threw one up, it was worse than the last spot.
It was shocking and just staggering, just how quickly Mother Nature was able to do this.
That was kind of a tense, scary moment there too, as we're battling a fire and then the power gets turned on to where there's power in that building.
It's just ironic that we were just up the road. Hats off to the linemen to be visually looking around, and seeing something like that.
The tree tops that were all down across that road in that valley, I was just walking the boles of trees to try to get back to areas because he couldn't, get to the ground, and hopping from tree to tree here and there and trying to kind of get an idea and take videos and pictures and looking at my GPS, and I knew the elevation, what it was supposed to be, and it seemed off, and I was trying to find a specific road, and I knew where it was on the GPS, but I couldn't find it. And finally I'm like, the elevation's way off, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So I found a pole stick and started poking it down, and I was 30 feet high up in the air. I was 30 feet above the road, directly on it. Had no idea.
It was just everything ripped apart. Like I looked at the forest that was here, and it used to be a canopy started, like 80 feet from my house. Then there were tall trees, and you could see the top of the canopy around. Now it's like way over there, like a football field over.
I was out of power probably one of the longest ones on River Road. We were out for right around 4 days, 4.5 days.
We have a substation up there, one of our 8, we call it the Almond substation, that was out of power. So initially, all of Stockbridge, all of that area up north of Boulder, a little bit south, a little bit west, and mostly east, was out of power.
The devastation here was just something that I had never thought I'd see in my life.
We were here 10, 12 hours a day, just trying to assess, figure out what we're going to do, what we can do, coordinating with the Bureau on how we're going to try to start salvaging. I mean, the roads crews, the EMTs, P&E, they were doing a great job with the road clearing and checking on people and that kind of stuff. So I was able to start getting after kind of the forestry aspects pretty quick.
Disaster started at 5:46 p.m. on June 15th, 2022, and I called an end to it at 12:01 on Sunday, June 19th, 22. That's when the power was restored.
I had the great pleasure of working in the forest here for 40 years.
One of the biggest and probably the only reason we are as far along with this as we got is help from the DNR, the Forest Service, some of the other federal agencies, and we're able to get aerial photography to assess damage. She could compare photos from before the storm and directly after the storm. We were able to get some photos from satellite imagery that was 3 days after the storm and compare those photos, and was able to actually make us maps of damage by almost percentage. So we were able to see the damage, could really see exactly where the tornado and the storm went through and pinpoint where we needed to go and what we needed to really see. And it was so unbelievably accurate that we could overlay it with our stand data and pull numbers.
That helped tremendously, and as far as the field work, of identifying areas that were down, the extent of the damage.
It was unbelievable. We were able to get people in months quicker than we ever thought we would have been able to. Because you couldn't walk through this, you couldn't paint boundary lines. But we could draw them now on the computer, load them into maps that we could give the loggers on their phones, and they could go out and start. So I was able to get people in the woods, get people cleaning things up really quickly. It was amazing, really.
A lot of sleepless nights as we stayed around the clock.
We moved as fast as we could to get it set up and get it bid out so we wouldn't lose value of that down timber. That involved, of course, the Bureau, me, people in Ashland, and the tribal level, the tribal foresters and environmental staff all cooperated together.
The storm, the way it came through, it really took out the high ground, it took out the legacy big trees, the real canopy trees. So we lost a lot of the oaks, we lost a lot of the big sugar maples.
I think something else that's really helped us out in the last couple of years has been us using social media, Facebook. A lot of our members are being informed now, and I think it makes it a lot easier for them. So I believe we update it every few hours, so they can see progress. They don't have to be calling in.
We had our water and sewer department stayed up for 3 days, making sure that water was working and the sewers were being pumped out. Just everything was covered, everything we could think of.
This forest needs wind events to create another age class. Age diversity and species diversity is two of the most important things of this forest, because you can't have the whole acreage mature out at the same time.
They just want to know what's going on out there, and that's a good way to get it to them.
People came by and they brought anything that they thought I could use, bottles of water, and it's a bit overwhelming when you think about it.
The reservation size is a little over 25,000 acres. Of that, 22,000 acres is forested, but that includes the swamps and some of the reserves and some of the buffers along the rivers. So I mean, of that 22,000, maybe just over 14,000 acres is what we would consider harvestable acres, so part of the commercial forest that we're actually going to be able to go in and manage through logging and cutting. And when we got through the data and looked at the storm, about half of that, 7,000 acres, was affected by this storm.
Everybody loves a big, fat, tall, beautiful, dark forest. That started from being a young tree like this 6-footer right here, It was a lot of work, but it's okay. It'll come back. A few generations from now, we'll have to thin it and nurture it onto maturity.
A traumatic event to see how close it came to so many houses. So, the house is here and all the trees are down behind it.
It was a large portion of some of the nicest timber on the reservation.
There's about 1 or 2 football field clear cut right in my backyard now. I'm good with it. Somebody might say it's sold, but it'll come back.
By the way, this is my backyard. From what it was to what it is quite a difference.
I really feel for the tribe because they lost so many valuable trees and the destruction was so complete.
Oh, it's a loss of the woods.
A big reason that we want to salvage some of this is not necessarily for the dollar amount that's nice, but we want to clean up a lot of this mess, allow access to the community members to get back into the woods. We want to clean up a lot of this so that the sites are prepared for the regeneration to come in to reforest these sites. It's devastating. The storm was awful, and it's going to take a long time to get back to where we were. And opening up the canopy, allowing new ground for stuff to start over is how these forests have evolved since the glaciers, really.
The main thing was nobody got hurt during that event. Yes, there were some homes that were damaged, but it could have been an awful lot worse.
The most amazing part of this storm was the amount of homes that were actually damaged was minimal. I mean, the amount of people that were hurt was extremely minimal.
There's some stands that had advanced regeneration underneath the overstory that got heavily damaged. My guess is it'll all come back by itself, and then our management will go toward selecting certain species that the tribe wants, like oak and your maples, against maybe the aspen and maybe the white birch.
Odd thing about it, though, was 2 months afterwards, I'm up working on the roof up top, and I look and I go over the edge where we have the satellite dish. The roof was pulled off this much. And I'm like, well, we got lucky. The roof didn't come off.
It was just community members on every road helping cut trees off the road as we came through. It was just awesome to see everybody pull together like they did.
It was a really good thing to see how the community came together on all levels.
The Stockbridge-Munsee community, their resiliency is one of the things that makes us special. Growing up in the community, the outdoors was our playground. It was before the days of video games and 24-hour cartoon networks. As kids, I mean, we were outdoors all the time. Whether that's picking berries, picking mushrooms, deer hunting, trout fishing, it's part of who we are. It's part of who I am.
Volunteers came out, the Family Center staff came out, people were bringing food and donating. This community, when we have a disaster, catastrophe, they come out of the woodworks to help. Even if we have disagreements, when the chips are down, there's a community to be in.
Big thank you to this community, how everybody pulled together and got through this.
It's some kind of miracle that that we didn't have more injuries, that we didn't lose more homes and more lives.
It was chaotic, but in the end, when we looked at everything, it was just like everything happened so smoothly, and we didn't lose anyone. Everything that we lost here was material. The roofs could be fixed, the cars could be replaced. That we were just lucky that no one lost their life in that situation.
What I noticed was the community, how fast they assembled and came together to help each other out was pretty cool to see. I mean, there was a lot of people out there doing what they could, getting people water or food that they needed. It was pretty cool.
When there's storms there, it seems like we all gather together and do what we can to help the next guy. We all pull together, you know. We all have our talents, and we use our talents to help the next guy that maybe don't have the same talent we have.
One benefit is like we all pull together and take care of each other, and that's a positive aspect of anything like this.
So we got lucky, you know, it could be worse.
It could be lots worse. Everything could be lots worse.
Everything could have been smashed to pieces and nothing left, you know.
Our food distribution center, we opened that up right away because we have walk-in coolers and freezers, so people were able to bring their stuff into our food distribution center, which had power, generated power, to at least save what they had.
The tribe authorized rooms at our hotel for those people who that were on oxygen or on CPAP machines or had medical conditions, cancer, something like that, that they needed to be comfortable. Our tribe stepped up and took care of that throughout the whole situation.
The silver lining is this: along Fairview Road, we got a three-phase line that runs east-west, and that's the only feed into Stockbridge-Munsee. The storm that went through, there was numerous trees, broken poles, wires down, and we put a work plan together, remove the overhead lines and poles and bury it underground. So that'll eliminate the tree issues.
I feel like as long as we didn't have to bury anyone because of those storms, everything else was replaceable, and we could go on and say we did the best we could.
Sometimes it takes a storm to make us see things that we didn't see before. Sometimes it takes that disaster to get us to appreciate what we have, when before we didn't think about it. It was always there, but we were off somewhere else because we never paid attention to it.
You know, electricity is a luxury. It's a habit. You know, when you go to a switch, I mean, I'm a lineman. I worked for a co-op forever, and when my power goes out at home, you know, sometimes you just tend to forget.
Community coming together in a time of need, regardless of your disposition of anything, it was help. It was help with water, it was help with food, it was help with anything. Anything from generators, you know, people, if they needed an oxygen machine, to get them to a room at the hotel so they had power to run their machines, cutting open driveways, cutting trees off houses, loggers that we have in our community here bringing in their machines to clear ways, other agencies coming in from different directions where they could. Was Bowler and Gresham agency fire departments coming in to help from where they could from different directions with their fire call, and you know, people trapped and things like that. So all hands on deck by an entire community is kind of what it come down to, and that's what it's about.
I think it makes us thankful that we live in a community where we still value our community members, where each neighbor is taking care of each neighbor, and we're not pulling together because we have money, we're pulling together because we want stronger bonds within the community.
It's going to regrow. This whole place started as a clear cut 120 years ago. And this is the forest we got. It's devastating. It'll take a while. It'll be different for some time, but it will regrow, and this time we'll be here from the beginning.
There'll be raspberries and blackberries in them big cuts now. In a few years, the berry pickers, they won't complain. They'll have a new berry patch to harvest in the future.
It'll come back pretty similar to what's here now over time. You're probably going to see your initial stages more aspen, more white birch, but you're going to have those oaks in there, yellow birch in areas, which is good for wildlife.
Listen to some of the other crews out there, you know, people coming out giving them, you know, something to drink, maybe something to eat.
And then we had to have meetings afterwards about what happened and what we can do better next time, and out of that came a thing called Media Alert. It's a way that early warning systems that are coming to our community can come over their cell phones. If they were in a house where their house would collapse, we have the ability to talk to them to see if they're okay. Instead of going door to door, they can text back a simple "I'm okay" or "I need help," and then we can make our way to that place. So that's what came out of it. So it's even better.
In our part of the country, we live in what's called Tornado Alley. Here from Iowa, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and maybe to Michigan, that's Tornado Alley where we get tornadoes. And Wisconsin gets maybe a couple dozen tornadoes a year normally, but not usually so much of this magnitude. It's always been there. But it's now going farther east and farther north than it ever has.
Power lines were out, but the power companies were able to come in and most people got power back within 3-4 days.
What always surprises me with these storms is that how few houses actually got destroyed. It's amazing. You'd think with all those trees going down, it had a lot more extensive damage to homes, but really, there really wasn't.
It'll come back. It'll be berry bushes and pioneer species and grow into mature northern hardwood again. I mean, it is what it is. It happened. We got to deal with it, and we will.
We live here. We grow up in the woods. We use it for mushroom hunting, gathering, spring, summer mushroom hunting, berry picking in the fall, hunting, firewood, gathering. Won't have any problem finding firewood now. Let's just say we do more outside than we do inside.
Climate change is affecting us all. This is a warning for us to start taking climate change seriously, not just for our community, for me, our community, but also for the entire world. You know, it's kind of a wake-up call for us to pay attention to not just ourselves too, but the whole global community.
We're really blessed with good neighbors and fresh air and the trees that are going to come back. They'll come back, not in my lifetime, but they'll come back again.
We had to help each other. We had to be out there. We had to assist. Everybody had to be on board, and everybody was. It was great to see.
It was crazy. We'd go to some houses and there'd be trees laid down in a circle around the house and a gutter would be bent. And you're like, there's no way. You lived in the woods. It should have gone one way and smashed the whole thing, but it didn't.
The silver lining, of course, is no one got hurt. The damage to my house was fixed. We survived, and I think that part of the story needs to be remembered too. The forest will recover. The forest is going to survive. Our aesthetic is going to be forever changed of it, but it's going to come back. Much like the people, the forest is resilient as well.
It could have been so much worse.
I feel so grateful. I've lived here since 1977. And I've never been in a better, more caring community than the Stockbridge-Munsee people.
We learned an awful lot from this experience. Most of it we already knew, but you know, when a community comes together to help each other, how our departments have come together to salvage through salvage operations, those are all silver linings. It's Mother Nature, a higher authority, said this is what needed to happen. So you can't argue that. So all we do now is come together and deal with it in years to come. It won't be in our lifetime, but in our grandchildren's lifetime, hopefully this area here and areas like it that have been salvaged will look like what it's supposed to look like, the surrounding area. Yes, it's an opportunity. Wish it didn't happen, but it did.
We are like one big family. Yeah, we do get in our little rows, but when we come together, I'm glad to have these people on my side.
Throughout the silver lining chapter of this story that we've been telling here, one word stands out. That's community. It defines us as to who and what we are. Our official name is Stockbridge-Munsee Community. There's a reason our elders chose that, and I think times like this bear that out. In the larger sense of the word community, yes, we have a physical, geographic, small community here, but our membership is everywhere. No matter where they live, they're part of this community and they're equally affected by everything that goes on here. And to all my fellow community members, thank you very much. Anishik, that storm brought out the best of us. The whole.
Bye.